This is Game On, discussing the biggest games and all the latest sports news with Johnny Montalbano and Hank Indictor on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network.
Wait a minute. I'm not Johnny. I'm not Johnny.
What the hell? How come I don't hear his typical catchphrase? Oh, wait. We've got Tom on my left. Tom, what's good?
I mean, I have Albano in my name, but I'm not Johnny Montalbano. But if you want a catchphrase, Hank, I'll start this show off with a catchphrase. How about them Cowboys?
I will take that. That's a good one.
All right, welcome to episode 40 of Game On. That's Hank Indictor, and yes, I'm Tom Albano. Little switcheroo on the sports shows of the Empty the Bench Network this week. Johnny is taking my spot over on Empty the Bench this week. Here I am with a special Monday night edition of Game On with Hank here. Lots and lots of football to talk about. I mean, in celebration of my coming onto this show, Hank, I have decided to get into the look with a sports cap of my own, sports background of my own. I mean, Hank, you and I have never really done a show together. I've done stuff with Johnny, I've done stuff with the Knicks, and I haven't done one with you, so that changes today.
Wait, since when did you work for the Knicks? Oh, wait, you're talking about Morgan Sinfonera. For a second, I thought you were talking about a certain orange and blue basketball team. But, no.
They are not on the show today. We have a lot of sports, though, a lot of football-related stuff. We'll be talking about all the divisional round games, the unfortunate loss of the New York Giants. We'll reflect back on the season. We'll mock the Cowboys. We'll talk about Patrick Mahomes' injury. We got plenty of baseball news. Hank, the Hall of Fame class is going to be announced tomorrow night, and it's going to be interesting to see if, well, just bluntly, if anybody is going to get inducted.
Yeah, I am not 100% sure about that. I mean, obviously, it'd be interesting to see A-Rod get in, but I'm not confident that that's going to happen anytime soon.
Neither am I. I think Scott Rowland, we said, in a pre-show meeting, was probably going to be the most likely. We'll talk about the conference championship games coming up this weekend, and we'll talk about this, since we're in the hockey spirit, this whole Bruce Boudreau controversy with the Canucks. But let's get started, Hank. Let's talk about the divisional round action. Obviously, playoff football is the big talking point of everything right now. Actually, before we do, Hank, let me actually just plug, first of all, etbspodcast.com, our brand new website. Go check it out. Hank, you've been blogging away on that. I just posted a blog today on the whole Francis Ngannou situation over at the UFC. There's a lot of stuff cranking out over there, so make sure to check that out. Also, make sure to follow the show at Game On ETB on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and follow the network at ETB Network on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. You can find Hank's Twitter information scrolling across the bottom at RangerHanky96 and Johnny's at Montalbano NY. You can find me on Twitter at Thomas J. Albano and Tom Talk Sports 9. Now that all that's out of the way, Chiefs beating the Jaguars, but I don't think the Chiefs' victory, which was only 7 points, Jaguars put up a hell of a fight. They did cover the spread, but I don't think really it's necessarily the game and the result that's the big story, as it is the fact that Patrick Mahomes had to come out of the game for some time due to a high ankle sprain, what has now been diagnosed as a high ankle sprain. And he says he is going to play in the AFC title game, but with a high ankle sprain, we've seen quarterbacks have to miss time. I think it might have been on the planted leg. If it was on the planted leg, that's going to be even more troubling. So, Hank, I know you've been very high on the Jaguars. I know we've said that Trevor Lawrence is him.
I still believe in that, by the way.
I mean, credit where credit it's due. I kind of said on the ETV Minute during this weekend, when it comes to the Jaguars and our Giants, which we'll get into later, kind of the same story, that they both exceeded expectations after falling to such lows last season, reaching the final 8 of this NFL season. So my hat off, and I'll tip the cap as I can to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Doug Peterson, terrific season, terrific comeback after starting 2-6 and it looking like it was the AFC South was all but over. They rack up all the wins, the Titans rack up all the losses, and the Jaguars steal the division in Week 18, and then have that unbelievable comeback against the Chargers. So incredible season by the Jaguars. Chiefs expected to win. They do, and they will get home field in the AFC title game thanks to the Bills' loss. But quite the scenario going on with Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, so as far as the Jaguars go, that was a team that accomplished a lot in 1 year, and they broke a lot of streaks. I mean, they won a primetime game for the first time in, I want to say, nearly 20 years. They beat a team. They swept the Tennessee Titans, something that has not happened since 2005. They also won a game against Houston, which hadn't happened in a while, and that might seem surprising on the surface because of the Texans and, the year they had. But, there were a lot of good signs that the Jaguars have a bright future. And look, they are going to be there for a while because look at the rest of that division. Do you honestly think the Texans are going to make a run for it?
No,
do you honestly? The Colts? I mean, come on. Really? This is the team that hired an unqualified Jeff Saturday to be the interim coach and are actually entertaining the idea to bring him back. And even then, Chris Ballard's still their GM. Until they make wholesale changes to their front office, I don't see that team competing anytime soon. So then that leaves the Titans. Okay, you kept around Mike Vrabel, which is understandable even if they had that losing streak to end the season, but now you're going to have to hire a new GM after getting rid of John Robinson, which, make no mistake, wasn't the bad move. Again, they don't really have a quarterback. Do you really think they're going to be able to beat the Jaguars to that division? Again, spoiler alert, the answer is no. And you know what? For the first time, probably since either David Garrard or Byron Leftwich, the Jaguars have their franchise quarterback, and, they have a pretty long window to be competing in the AFC at this point. So definitely a silver lining for them. As for the Chiefs, this definitely was not a surprise. And going into this game, I had a feeling they were going to win because, it pretty much feels like, a Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid trying to go on a revenge tour after some really bad losses they've had in the playoffs the last 2 years. And they're trying to regain their status as one of the top dogs in the AFC. And look, they're back in the AFC Championship. And fun fact, Patrick Mahomes has made the AFC Championship every single year since he has been the starting quarterback of the Kansas City Chiefs. That's pretty incredible because look at the other quarterbacks that have been in at least five NFC championships. Only John Elway, Joe Montana, and conference championships. Joe Montana didn't announce. That's neither here nor there. Tom Brady, Joe Montana, John Elway, and I would have to say the OG TB12, I think, made it to more AFC championships with the Steelers in the 70s. That's not a very big crew. And by the way, let me give you another fun fact. Peyton Manning made it to 5 AFC championships throughout his whole career.
I mean, granted, regardless of names and such, I mean, you listen to those names, Hank, that you have just been rattling off, and Patrick Mahomes has been able to accomplish that. I mean, within 5-6 seasons. I mean, consider that he didn't play his rookie season. He was sitting behind Alex Smith, then took over following the trade of Alex Smith over to Washington. And ever since Patrick Mahomes has been having the helm in Kansas City, it has just been quite the ride for those guys. That it's just been constant success after constant success. Yes, I know They haven't gone to Super Bowl every year. Yes, I know 5 or 6 AFC straight title games, and it's only resulted in 1 Super Bowl title, 2 Super Bowl appearances. But I mean, just the level of success that that team is having, that they are consistently at the top of the NFL, I just think speaks volumes to the kind of quarterback that Patrick Mahomes is. I mean, when you see him, battling through some of the things that would knock, a normal quarterback down, or some of these plays, some of these throws that he makes where it's like, like I'm thinking now of the batted, the batted ball, and then it ends up back in his hands and he gets off, another play. It's like, it's kind of unfair. Like, he is just another level of talent with the NFL.
Not to mention that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar like skyhook touchdown pass he threw that ended up with the 50-yard rush. Like,
yeah,
only Patrick Mahomes can do that stuff. And then the shovel pass, like, because obviously we know where that athletic gene comes from because his father pitched in the major leagues.
Yep,
absolutely unreal. And they're definitely going to be going in with something to prove with that chip on their shoulder. But, as we mentioned, Patrick Mahomes is definitely somebody you have to watch out for. But that injury is kind of a concern. And, Tom, to what extent do you think it's going to really affect him?
It's going to affect him. To what degree is going to vary. I mean, it's one of those things where I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, it's not going to affect him at all. I mean, the man had to come out for several plays when it came to that game against the Jaguars. Now, granted, Chad Henne, we have seen him step up before. We saw him step up in the 2021 postseason, the COVID season postseason, when the Cleveland Browns are having their run and the Chiefs stopped the Browns in their momentum. Chad Henne will not be able to do that against the Bengals.
No.
So if you're Patrick Mahomes, you need to be out there. Although, it seems like he wants to be out there and he's going to be out there. The question is, should he, and how much it's going to affect him? And I think it's going to affect him quite a bit. I think he will manage to play through and do well because, as we said, the level of talent that Patrick Mahomes has compared to a lot of these other quarterbacks is just night and day. However, can I see the rest of the team stepping up? I mean, I can, but against the Bengals defense, like if the Bengals come out to play like they did against the Buffalo Bills, I think the Chiefs might be in for quite some ride that they're not going to enjoy.
Yeah, and I think we pretty much know how you feel about the Bengals, but I think we'll get a little bit more into the Bengals later on in the show. No?
I mean, if you want to go to it next, it's up next.
Oh, yeah. Let's talk about it, shall we?
All right.
Now, Tom, you've been saying pretty much, I don't know, since what, week 7, week 8, or tell me where I'm wrong. Don't disrespect the Bengals. And
I'll tell you where you're wrong. I'll tell you where you're wrong. Not of this season, of last season.
last season was where it started. Well, keep in mind, guys, I've only really been part of the network since like what?
Oh, that's true. That's true.
So I wouldn't have known that. But with that having been said, I tend to agree with you on a lot of that don't disrespect the Bengals stuff, although I wasn't quite as outspoken as you were. However, if you want to know a team that I was pretty outspoken about being high on?
The Jaguars.
The Bills.
Oh, the Bills. Yeah, true.
And as it turns out, there goes my Super Bowl pick.
I mean, Hank, there goes my Super Bowl pick too. I did say at the start of this Super Bowl, at the start of this playoffs, that the Bills would probably ride the momentum of DeMar Hamlin in route to their first Super Bowl championship, but they don't even get there. They don't even get to the conference title game because they ran into the Bengals. I mean, this was an interesting matchup. We had all the high expectations after their January 2nd Monday Night Football game got postponed as a result of the Hamlin injury, and the Bengals probably had all the odds against them. They were in Buffalo. There's all that talk about maybe the Bengals could have had some sort of coin flip or some sort of neutral site for this game because of how the seeding could have been had the Bills and Bengals played on Monday Night Football that one time. It was snowy, favors the conditions of Buffalo, and the Bengals just completely, like I said right there on the headline, it was a rout. The Bills were competitive early on, but the Bengals just completely took over the game.
Yeah, and let me give you a bit of a fun fact, or a not so fun fact. This was
Not
only
so
the
fun fact.
second time the Bills have lost a home playoff game at the, well, I know it has a different name, but at the Ralph since it opened in 1973.
Wow. I mean, and I did say, by the way, Hank, on ETB, on the last edition of ETB, I said whoever wins this game between the Bengals and Bills, that this is probably the Super Bowl. Whoever wins this game is probably going to be my pick for the Super Bowl. And granted, I did start at the very start of the season when Johnny Morganson and I did our little NFL preview. I did say that Cincinnati Bengals would probably be the AFC representative again, and they would probably win the Super Bowl. Now, my original pick was for the NFC rep was the Rams. Granted, they went on the Super Bowl hangover of all Super Bowl hangovers and just completely fell apart. But now I look at these teams. The Chiefs, I mean, they beat the Chiefs last season. That was with a healthy Patrick Mahomes.
Mhm.
The Eagles, I mean, the Eagles have shown they are beatable. They really have shown that. I mean, they lost to a Saints team. They lost to the Cowboys. I know we're talking about, Jalen Hurts having the season that he's had. Jalen Hurts that maybe he's been playing better, but we're still questioning about him being 100% or not. And then the 49ers, I mean, Bengals 49ers might be the most competitive game out of the potential Super Bowl out of all of these. Because I could see the Chiefs beating the Eagles. I could see the Chiefs beating the 49ers, but a Bengals 49ers game kind of tickled my fancy.
Well, I mean, it has happened before, and Joe Montana won both of those games,
That's true. That is true.
including in the second one, the 92-yard
And
comeback drive.
yep,
Yeah, no, I think that would definitely make for an interesting storyline, but I definitely think the Bengals could probably avenge those two Super Bowl losses. How cool would that be for the Bengals to get their first Super Bowl win against the same team that broke their hearts 35 years ago?
yeah, seriously. I mean, to be able to beat Patrick Mahomes 2 straight years and then to be able to get your revenge on the 49ers, as you said, all those years ago for your first Super Bowl. I mean, granted, I even said it last year in my postseason, post Super Bowl take that I wrote on social media. At the time when it was Bengals versus Rams, that the Rams needed to win that Super Bowl after selling off all their first round picks, after all that they put in. It was kind of an all in thing. Meanwhile, the Bengals were a very young team and that there was still time. And now, granted, I know a lot of people pick the Ravens over them with the AFC North. I know the first month and a half was very shaky for this team. You had a couple of injuries here and there, but the Bengals have searched through it all. And I mean, they've still got the weapons that they have. Everybody is healthy and ready to go. Joe Burrow, Joe Mixon, and then Joe Burrow's incredible receiving core of T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, and Tyler Boyd. They've got a lot at their hands, a lot at
Those
their
are two
disposal.
number one wide receivers you just mentioned.
Yep, they have a lot at their disposal. Tyler Boyd, solid number 3, could be a number 2 anywhere else. And they lost CJ Uzoma in the offseason to the Jets, but I mean, it's Hayden Hurst who's now their tight end, right?
Yes, I
And
believe
Hayden Hurst, I think I know usually he could be considered like in fantasy football one of those throwaway tight ends, but I mean, he very quietly can be a very productive tight end. I know the offensive line has had its questions, but it's held up over this last couple of months. And the defense, like I mentioned, if the defense was able to play the way that they did against the Bills, these other 3 teams that are left with them in the Final Four could be in for a world of hurt.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, the Bengals, I've also been saying, hey, watch out for them a bit. Like, again, like I said, I haven't been as outspoken about the Bengals as you have.
Yeah, I was going to say, watch out. Hold on a minute. I think this is time for me to say, don't disrespect the Bengals.
And yeah, I haven't really. It's funny. I've rarely ever really been in a situation where I could pick against the Bengals, at least since I started doing the pick segment with you guys.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, I'm really interested in seeing how they do against the Kansas City Chiefs, and if the Chiefs could somehow get their revenge.
For sure. All right, that's the
Joe
AFC.
Burrow definitely has that it factor. I do have to say that. And this is your friendly neighborhood reminder. I was the one who said weeks ago Joe Burrow should get more MVP consideration, and I stand by that now more than ever.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we want to say that Trevor Lawrence is him. Hank, I think Joey B is him.
Oh, we already knew that last year, but yes.
This season just solidified it.
Pretty much.
So now let's go over to the other side of things, to the other conference. And, well, I know we're going to be very sad in just a little bit, but I think right now we have a little bit of gloating time here. Because, well, how about them Cowboys? Oh, no, I've gotten rid of it. However, I still do have this one.
Oh, yes. Broncos country. Couldn't get rid of Broncos country that easily, could we?
No. And I'm glad that through our little crossovers that the Game On audience has now gotten used to Broncos country. Let's ride. However,
can I just say, this has just been so fun to gloat at them that it feels like this is just becoming a national holiday at this point. The longer the drought keeps going.
Because the Giants had been the laughingstock of the NFL for a couple of years. I mean, the Jets are Jets. Finally, somebody else gets to be the laughingstock, and it gets to be Denver. And that, to think that trade with Russell Wilson. That we were saying, the Broncos, are on the up and up. Seattle's entering a rebuild, and no, look, Seattle gets a top 5 pick, but they were a playoff team, and the Broncos, well,
wah wah.
Oh, hang on, where is it?
Yeah, no, again. Cowboys Elimination Day is pretty much a national holiday at this point. Although, wait a minute, celebrating and making fun of the Cowboys Day, that's every day. But in all seriousness, it's another classic game where we realize something we already knew a while ago. Dak Prescott is not him.
Well, more like the Cowboys are frauds, and they managed to kick their fans in the dicks. Oh, wait a minute. But Brett Maher can't kick worth of shit, so at this point, it can't even be a kick. They probably missed when they tried to kick their fans.
In fairness, that missed extra point that he had was blocked, so you can't really fault him there.
I mean, it was a little bit of a shoddy kick, but I mean, at the end result of the game, considering how the rest of it played out, you can't put it all on him. I mean, Dak, I don't think I don't look down on Dak as much as, say, you do or Morgeson does, but the interceptions, we do say, come to the bite, and, well, the 2 interceptions that he threw in this game.
Well, also, when you factor in the contract, I'm sorry, but I kind of have every right to, give Dak a hard time when he struggles in the big stage.
All right, granted, my point is that the 2 interceptions that he threw were also kind of costly. And, well, you know what else was kind of costly? I
What?
mean, Dalton Schultz. Once again, this whole thing about a catch comes back. It's 6 years ago all over again with did Dez catch the ball or not? Did Dalton Schultz
6
catch
years
it or
ago,
not?
I was like a senior in high school. That was like January of 2015. 8 years ago. Good Lord, I'm getting old. So far.
What is time anyways, Hank?
I know.
But granted, yeah, the Cowboys just managed to cowboy themselves out of the postseason once again. But let's be real. The 49ers are the better team. I mean,
Oh, definitely.
Look how stacked that the front office made this team. I mean, they were able to patch things over with Deebo Samuel, and he came back. He and Brandon Ayuk have been an incredible combination. And that's even with all the changing at quarterback. The fact that they went to their third string quarterback after Trey Lance struggles and goes down with injury, and then Jimmy G goes down with injury, everything looks bad. And then Brock Purdy comes in, steals the show. And even if Brock Purdy, you want to question, oh, he's a rookie quarterback and he's on this big stage of the NFL playoffs. I mean, look at the rest of the team around him. George Kittle is, he's a tight end, but he might as well be a receiver. He and Kelsey of Kansas City.
He's an aircraft carrier.
Yeah, well, he and Kelsey, we always say about in fantasy football that even though they're tight ends, they're really wide receivers. And then the acquisition of Christian McCaffrey, and they didn't even need to pay much to get him. That was an absolute steal, and they could have him for another few seasons. He and Eli Mitchell are proving to be a terrific 1-2. Now, granted, Eli Mitchell could probably learn a thing or two under McCaffrey, like not running out of bounds when you're trying to run out the clock.
You know what's crazy? They could have had Christian McCaffrey when they drafted it at the draft, like much sooner.
True, very true.
In an alternate universe where they actually take advantage of the idiotic Chicago Bears Mitch Trubisky trade and do not take Solomon Thomas.
Yeah, that one.
Or Solomon Miller. I don't know who Solomon Thomas is. That's probably a made up name. Either way, he's a bust, so it's kind of, you can see why I kind of butchered it a bit.
Hey, let me double check. Round 1, pick 3 of the. No, don't give me the NBA draft, Google. Give me the NFL draft. No, that's Solomon Thomas. You were right.
Oh, was Solomon Thomas? Oh, I don't know where Miller came from. But either way, that was definitely one of their mistakes. But yet, even with some of the mistakes that John Lynch has made, and like people are going to overlook those mistakes just because of how good the 49ers are. He has really built an insane roster. And I don't think enough people really give credit to Kyle Shanahan for the coaching job that he has done over there. I mean, you could put in any quarterback and their offensive system is still going to be really good. And who knows, like, what it would have done had Trey Lance been the starting quarterback and stayed healthy. Although, then again, maybe in an alternate universe, they probably could have used Justin Fields. But again, that's a story for another day. But the fact of the matter is, this is now the third time in the last 4 years that the San Francisco 49ers are back in the NFC Championship. They are continuing to knock on the door. And, this is going to be a really interesting matchup because now they go from one half of the dynamic duo of evil to the other one, the Philadelphia Eagles. Although this one is going to be much tougher because they're going to have to go out on the road for that matchup since the Philadelphia Eagles are the number 1 seed. But, back to the 49ers, we haven't even mentioned their defense with Nick Bosa, 18.5 sacks, and Fred Warner, who's another aircraft carrier. By the way, thank you, Dave Gettleman, for passing on him twice and taking Lorenzo Carter and BJ Hill. Very, very smart.
Like you said in your blog post recently, let's stop giving Dave Gettleman any sort of credit. But yeah, the 49ers are an absolutely stacked team. And they are going to make for
also
real.
thank you, Dave Gettleman, for taking DeAndre Baker instead of Deebo Samuel. No, I'm not salty.
Yeah, that's all I got to say. You were very wrong on that, Mr. DG. But yeah, I mean, the 49ers are going to be very tough competition for whoever it is that they face, whether it be the Eagles in this NFC title game, or if they get past the Eagles, whether it be either the Bengals or the Chiefs, should be an absolutely fun battle. Yeah, I mean, Kyle Shanahan, I mean, obviously gets mocked a lot for his choking habits in the postseason. And John Lynch, as you mentioned, has made many mistakes as general manager of San Francisco. But the team that they have right now is solid. And you can't argue with 3 conference championship appearances in 4 seasons. That's the kind of consistent success. I mean, we were just talking about the 5 straight that Patrick Mahomes has brought the Chiefs to. So there should be no complaining in that department. And it'll be very interesting to see how a 49ers-Eagles matchup plays out. All right, let's pull this off like a Band-Aid, Hank. Eagles just completely trounced the Giants. That was not fun to watch on Saturday night. I know Giants Twitter has been a bit of a dumpster fire, but I am not going to take away anything from the kind of success that the Giants have had, the greater, how do we say, how the goalpost, I'm not going to move the goalposts. The Giants did not have the kind of expectations that, that would have resulted in a final 8 appearance. But let's talk about the Eagles and their perspective. I mean, Jalen Hurts, he has looked great. I bought into Jalen Hurts this season as, he was going to make improvements. And I think the acquisition of A.J. Brown has helped with that. But I mean, and this one will hurt for Giants fans considering the Bears and considering that 2021 draft. But Devonta Smith has just come into another world. He is looking phenomenal.
That's another team that has 2 number 1 wide receivers. I mean, look, as painful as this game was, and look, spoiler alert, I may or may not have another blog coming up. This one is about Brian Daboll and his questionable coaching decisions. The first one was really egregious. I mean, 4th and 8, you're at like what? The
50-yard line at best. I mean, I understand Daboll's, ballsiness.
And that's one of the things that I love about Brian Daboll is that.
But time and place. Yeah, I agree, Hank. But time and place.
Exactly. The first quarter, way too early for that. And the problem with that thinking was now you're putting the Eagles in a chance to,
go up 2 scores, and they did.
And look, if I'm being honest, like everybody who was watching this game and everybody in the stadium knew the game was over as soon as he did that. Why? Mm-hmm. Because look, don't get me wrong. The Giants offense was firing all cylinders in the Vikings game, but there's a big difference between the Vikings defense and the Philadelphia Eagles defense. And the Eagles defense was probably a close second only to the 49ers for how good it was. And not to mention, this Eagles defense also had twice as many sacks as the Minnesota Vikings did on the season. I think the Vikings were in the bottom tier in that department. Yeah. The Eagles had 70 sacks on the season. So yeah, going up against their defense down 14-0 with the roster the Giants had, there any realistic chance the Giants had at possibly getting the upset special pretty much went out the window right then and there. I
mean, it was the snap back to reality, to quote Eminem.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. And I'm, quite frankly, I'm surprised that James Bradbury pick didn't result in any points with the way they were dominating us all game. Like 28 points in the first half alone. The Eagles made it to the red zone in 4 of their 5 possessions. I'm not counting the last one that ended on the quarterback kneel down to end the half.
Yeah.
Four out of their 5 possessions went in the red zone. All 4 times they scored. They were absolutely efficient. It was like they must have felt like they were taking candy from a baby. That's how easy it was.
It looked like the way. It looked that way. And Hank, you know what else they did? That when we said, I would say ETB Endgame on that for anybody to beat the Giants, there was one thing they had to do: stuff Saquon Barkley. And well, they managed to stop the run pretty well. Not every time, but they did manage to limit his success.
Well, I mean, he did have that 139-yard rush, but that all it really did was inflate his stats because, like,
exactly,
he had like 60. He had like 61 yards. Now, granted, he only got the ball 9 times, which again was the same amount of carries he had in the Viking game. But the difference in this one was the Giants were in such an early hole that they really couldn't properly utilize the run game. I think they pretty much had to pack that away.
They forced Danny to throw, and once again, granted, whatever you want to say about Danny, granted, if you're not the biggest fan of him, but he has done well this season, and it once again highlighted a weakness of the Giants is that. Granted, they have some decent wide receivers. Isaiah Hodgins, as I mentioned last week on ETV, absolutely underrated. Probably one of the quiet heroes of this season. But, as much as we make fun of Federa, about the blank check with the Odell thing, I think I kind of understand his point of we need and Hank, hopefully you agree, a playmaker. We need somebody who can go to the extremes like an Odell can. That kind of flexibility, the kind of, stretchness, the kind of unbelievable catches. You need somebody that can allow Danny to kind of, be a crazy self every now and again and make those deep throws.
Yeah, and, Scavetta and I have talked about this a lot on Big Blue Avenue. Like, one of the reasons that you don't see Daniel Jones posting up crazy numbers is because and throwing the deep ball a lot is because he doesn't have the talented receivers to where they can create separation and get those big yards at least on a consistent basis. So that's why when I did my reasons you can't blame Brian Daboll, I only put Daniel Jones at number 5 because quite frankly, as much as you want to say he didn't have a great game and he didn't, like, it's not like he was really helped. I mean, first of all, it's not his job to hold on to a ball that could have been caught. Cough, cough, Richie James. And it's also not his fault that Isaiah Hodgins didn't have a good game either. He only had 1 catch for 3 yards. And no, that's if you look at that post, that's not a typo. So that's one thing. And then, you could call me a Daniel Jones apologist all you want, but like, even then, where was the help from the offensive line? All I kept seeing all night was Evan Neal getting absolutely bullied by the Eagles front 4. And by the way, the Eagles front 4 each had a sack.
Yeah, and I mean the Eagles offensive line. Lane Johnson
ended up having 1.5 sacks, and then Cox and Graham also contributed with the sack. Graham, not a surprise. Brandon Graham's notoriously been a giant killer over the years.
Yeah. I mean, you talk about giant killer Boston Scott getting another touchdown because surprise. But Lane Johnson, I mean, I'm surprised he even played. And it's like he didn't even need to contribute much. He just needed to be there. And the Eagles just dominated that the way that they did.
Here's how good their offensive line was. I believe they only allowed like either 4 or 5 pressures and 1 sack. And that sack wasn't to a player that you would have expected. It was Xavier McKinney who got that sack.
Yeah.
So essentially they did what they had to do. They held Dexter Lawrence, Azeez Ojulari, and Kayvon Thibodeau in check. And that, there's a reason why 3/5 of that offensive line made it to the Pro Bowl.
For sure.
And pretty much everyone on that offensive line is a Pro Bowler. That's how great it is.
We'll talk about the 49ers, the Eagles, and Bengals Chiefs Conference Championship games before we close out the show. Hank, just to finish off the football talk for now, let's do a little post-mortem. Let's do a little reflection on this Giants season. I'll start things off. if you told me that the Giants would be 9-7-1, I would make it to the second round of the playoffs, I would have said that would have been at the very minimum a stretch goal, because what I saw was our very easy schedule early on. I said we'll probably be 500 by the bye, and then things might fall apart when divisional play comes in December. And it was looking kind of that way. About divisional play might have been, the Giants' downfall in December. But very early on, you saw signs that there was something about this team, whether it be the ballsiness of Brian Dable and that first week against the Titans and getting that win, whether it be passing tests. I remember me and Federa talking about, they were playing the Packers in London and then they were playing the Ravens, and we said each of them was a test. Would we be brought back down to the reality of, the previous couple of seasons? But no, they just kept winning. And then, like I mentioned, the trap game with the Lions, the struggles started to make their way late November, early December, as divisional play started to rear its head. But then they get that win against the Commies in the week before Christmas. And then they put up a competitive game against the Vikings, and then the trouncing of the Colts to get into the playoffs. And even with the backups in, losing to the Eagles just by 6 games, which kind of makes the loss to the Eagles in the divisional round even more depressing. But just the matter of that, for all, even at my highest of expectations, I didn't see this team make it a Final 8. So I'm not going to sit here and cry about, us, losing to the Eagles and falling short of the conference championship when, we weren't even expected to make the playoffs, and we ended up getting our first playoff win since that Super Bowl 46 run.
Yeah, look, if you looked at the team and based their win total solely off the roster, I think I said 6 or 7 would be the win total before the season, but I think maybe you could argue I may have been a little bit generous at times, like before the season. But the fact of the matter is, this was a team that, you were expecting to see like some improvements before the season. Like, you weren't expecting to see the playoffs, but you were expecting to see like little signs. And even Brian Dable admitted that they have a ways to go. And I think even during the season, he and Shane never really, I don't think they ever fully believed in their own hype. And because if they did, Shane would have gone out of his way to try to like break the bank on a wide receiver at the trade deadline, which, you and I don't remember what you said, but I was very much against that idea, because that's not really how you build a championship team.
Correct. But I think even if you want to blame the Giants in that, I don't think you can blame them completely. I mean, the big talk of that whole trade deadline thing about requiring a receiver was DJ Moore. And, well, you've seen the behavior of the Carolina Panthers in that they are being really unwilling to trade somebody like a DJ Moore who they want to build their franchise around.
Right there.
What happened?
Talk about a bullet dodge right there.
Yeah.
And by the way, and it's funny I should mention that, because technically Joe Shane did go out and get a wide receiver, and that was Isaiah Hodgins, who probably, if you really look at the numbers between him and Jerry Jeudy, he was just as productive as Jeudy, like, since he came to the Giants. And not only that, but his numbers ended up being better than that of Kadarius Toney. So who really won those trades? I think the Giants did.
It's fair to say, but I mean, Toney needed to go anyways. He was a head case, and that whole injury thing just indicated he didn't want to be here.
And you know what? Brian Dable, I don't know if you heard that story, but Brian Dable actually tried to make it so that he would enjoy like being at training camps and practices, but Toney still was not receptive to him during those times.
And I mean, that's another Dave Gettleman failure.
What does that tell you? Well, thankfully he wasn't around to use that first round pick the following year that he got in that trade.
Correct. And I will say about our first round picks from last year, Kayvon Thibodeau, I'm so happy with. He's going to be a stud, hopefully, for the next several years.
He's only going to get better.
Yeah.
He's only going to get better. And
sadly,
Evan Neal, while he got bullied around in that game.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think, unfortunately, Hank, I think Evan Neal is, credit to Joe Shane. I'm not trying to take any away from him, but considering just the whole, the Giants as a whole, yet another offensive line bust.
No, I disagree. I think it's way too early to be calling him that. I mean, look, Andrew Thomas struggled at times.
I shouldn't say bust, but now it's time to be concerned already.
You can be concerned, but I remember what I watched from him film wise, like right before the draft. This is a guy that has some talent. I think what needs to happen with Evan Neal is I think he needs to get used to the fact that right tackle is going to be where he is, and he's going to have to, adjust to that position. And ultimately, I think with time, he's going to be just fine at that position because, like I said, it's not like the talent isn't there. Like I knew, and it would be it would only be a matter of time before Andrew Thomas developed, and sure enough, you could make the argument that he's one of the best left tackles in the league. And in fact, I would argue that he's probably one of the few players on the Giants roster that you can actually look at and say, maybe he would still make the starting lineup for the Philadelphia Eagles, which is a pretty big bar that I'm setting right there. But, ultimately, I said that Andrew Thomas was arguably our offensive MVP. And look, I still stand by that. Saquon, as talented as he is, he does not have that comeback season without the strong play of him at left tackle. And he also was a big reason that Daniel Jones was able to limit his turnovers and stay upright a little bit more. So yeah, I think Evan Neal, I'm not really as worried about as most people are, but he definitely needs to improve. I will give you that.
All right, so then let me throw this over to you then, Hank.
Go for it.
First round pick, considering what we're talking about with the offensive line, consider what we're talking about with the playmaking, what would you do with that first round pick? Because it's only going to fall into, so I'm trying to do the math here. So the 31 and 32 are no, it's going to be 30 and 31 because the Miami got penalized their pick for the first round. So that means the Giants pick will fall somewhere between 24 and 27. I can't do the things off the top of my head. I think it would be 24. Do you go after whatever best wide receiver there is possible, or do you use that pick on an offensive lineman? Or I do have a third option. Do you try to offer that up to some team, say, for a receiver, say Arizona, for DeAndre Hopkins?
I don't know about offering it up for DeAndre Hopkins, but I do think a wide receiver is definitely a possibility. I mean, there are going to be a good amount of teams that are, looking to improve their quarterback. So you might not see too many teams try to go after a wide receiver in the first round. So I don't think that's necessarily out of the realm of possibility. However, I think if there's another need that the Giants need to fill, I would say definitely get another interior offensive lineman, because let's look at it like position by position. Like center, you cannot go into next year with John Feliciano at center. I'm sorry, but he stinks. Like, bye-bye. However, what you can do is you can probably move Nick Gates over there. I mean, he's the one that developed a really good rapport with Daniel Jones. So I think it would make more sense if you had him start at that position as opposed to, say, John Feliciano. And don't know if Mark Lewinsky can stay at that position. I know he was an okay acquisition, but I think you definitely need to get some more help in the interior offensive line, because like I said, Daniel Jones was on the ground a good amount of times. He was sacked 5 times, and the Giants just could not get anything going. A big reason for that was the offensive line. Although, that being said, we what Clyde Frazier would call Swiss cheese defense.
It's a very fair point. I mean, usually I would be a little more up and up. I'm not the biggest college follower as say Johnny is, but
Yeah,
even
Johnny and Scavetta are people that I tend to rely on with regard to college stuff.
so on that note, then Hank, I'll ask you: do they have any insight as to this wide receiver class? Because I know with the running backs, you got Bijan and a couple of others. I know with quarterbacks, we have this whole thing about Stroud and Bryce Young. You know, the Chicago Bears had the #1 pick. I was talking with Zambando, my co-host of MMA Outsiders, who's a Chicago native and big Bears fan. We're talking about, maybe the Bears trade the #1 pick, get, say, to the Raiders, get a Devontae Adams, some help for Fields, and then the Raiders spend their #1 pick on either one of those guys, and the Texans take the other. But that's just my little thing about the NFL draft thus far. But I don't know about anything really about this wide receiving class.
Yeah, no, I'm going to have to look more into that later on, but I'm definitely going to be watching some film on the receivers in the months to come just to see which one would be a good fit for the Giants.
I mean, granted, we've seen that you don't need a high draft pick to get a receiver. I mean, Antonio Brown was a 6th-round pick. Adam Thielen went undrafted and then made the team as essentially a walk-on with the Vikings in, I think, 2016 or so. That there are definitely going to be possibilities out there. It's just a matter of it's going to be on Shane to find out, to find that one person. Like, Isaiah Hodgins was a great underrated talent, but now they need to find that next playmaker that's going to allow Jones to develop. The last thing about the Giants post-mortem, Hank, big question. What do we do with Danny and what do we do with Saquon?
I think you have to try to you definitely got to worry about the price being right with Daniel Jones. And obviously, you'd want to keep him for another year, but you definitely have to be careful with your investment in Daniel Jones.
I think, well, on that note, Hank, I mean, I think what we're talking about with Danny could apply, at least in some degree, to the rest of the quarterbacks that are going to be on the market. I mean, you got Lamar, who's probably going to be franchise tagged, but is going to want out of Baltimore. You got Derek Carr, who's going to either be traded or released. You got a couple of quarterbacks in there, but my whole point is that, and I said it, I think, last week on ETB, this Deshaun Watson fully guaranteed $230 million deal that Haslam gave him last year is going to F things up in the quarterback market.
Yeah. No, it'll be really crazy to see. And there's going to be a lot of there are going to be a lot of over-anxious GMs that are just going to overpay their quarterbacks just to try to solve what may be a problem that seems big at the moment, but then could end up leading to
a quarterback might not be able to solve, actually.
Yeah, just ask the Broncos how that worked out.
Oh, I'm sorry. What did you say, Hank? Did you mention the Broncos?
I did that on purpose, yes.
Okay.
That on purpose. I may or may not have egged you on into that. Sorry, not sorry.
I'm fine with it. Broncos country, let's ride.
Never gets old.
It won't. I'm glad that it's going to be a running gag on this network for quite a while until the Broncos actually do stuff. So here's the question: would you use the tag on either or both of Danny and or Saquon?
I feel like they're probably gonna be a package deal because both of them are pretty much spiritual leaders in that locker room. Like, granted, again, you want to be careful about what you pay for Saquon Barkley because
the injury factor.
Yes, the injury factor, and then you also don't know how long a running back is going to last either.
3 years is the average.
Yeah, exactly. So definitely want to be careful there, but with that having been said, if you let Saquon go, you're also losing one of the big voices in that locker room. So
Yeah, and who are you going to get to fill that hole? I mean, I remember when Nick Morgeson and I constantly talk about the 2018 draft. It's like, yeah, I mean, you could make the argument about getting the quarterback and whatnot, but I mean, if you didn't draft Saquon, were you really going to go into that season with I think it was Jonathan Stewart as your running back one? There were going to be problems, regardless in that draft. And Saquon, for granted all the injuries that he's had, as you mentioned, he has been he has been a locker room leader. He has been quite possibly, I would even say, he was the face of the franchise, even as Eli Manning was beginning to fade out and retire.
yeah, definitely.
So I mean, it's going to be really interesting to see. My whole point to this postmortem, though, is if you want to be upset about another loss to the Eagles, fine, but that shouldn't take away from anything about that this season. This will go down as one of the best non-Super Bowl winning seasons the Giants have had, for all the expectations that were skyrocketed against.
Well, not only that, it was also really important in that it represented the first step in trying to really change their culture. I mean, look, obviously Rome wasn't built in a day, but I definitely like the direction that they're going. And I haven't really been able to say that in quite some time.
I know. But now the question is, because unfortunately I have to say it, but things looked great under Ben McAdoo after that first season, and then how quickly they fell apart. The test for Shine and for Dable is going to be year 2.
Okay. I'm going to agree to disagree. Yes, I agree that year 2 is going to be a real test in what we have with Ben McAdoo, but the 2016 team and the 2022 team,
2 different teams. I know. My point. I think my point.
Circumstances.
I think my point, Hank, was that McAdoo only lasted 2 seasons.
Well, yeah, but also
Judge lasted 2 seasons. Who am I forgetting between them? 2018, 19. Shermer lasted only 2 seasons. I don't mind. And granted, I'm saying that Alex too. I don't want Dable to be the same kind of way.
Well, again, the 2016 team, though, I feel was different because that was more of like, you kind of knew that was the end of the real window to win with Eli Manning, but you just didn't know how much of a disaster the next year would be, and you didn't.
That I agree with.
So
I just don't want to go back to that.
But no, I totally get it. But I just think this team has a bigger window than the 2016.
Okay, then actually my real last question. Considering
and also at the end of 2016, you could kind of tell, even though you hated that Eli was getting benched next year, you could kind of see the signs that he was going to be at the beginning of the end too.
So at least my real last question then, Hank. I mean, what is going to be your expectation? Because granted, they played well. However, like the last team in with the NFC was 9-8. The Giants finished 9-7-1, and they have the Cowboys and Eagles ahead of them with the NFC East. And the schedule for next season is going to be not as easy. Let me bring up their 2023 opponents actually, because they did just recently announce them. So it's going to be home games against, not counting the obvious with their divisions, it's going to be home games against the Packers, Jets, Pats, Rams, and Seahawks, and road games against the Saints, Raiders, Cardinals, Niners, Dolphins, and Bills.
So I definitely think it could go either way. I don't know that I can really judge them until after, say, the off season, but I'm definitely hoping they can follow that up with another solid playoff appearance. But I think 2 to 3 years from now, that's when we'll really be talking about the Giants as a serious contender.
Here's hoping. That's my hope. But yeah, granted, this was a phenomenal
I don't think
season.
they'll be ready yet next year. I think they might be better, but I think it'll be another year where they just take another step in the right direction.
For sure. I'm on that train. All right. Let's talk some baseball, Hank. So we had a very big trade this past week, despite all that was going on with football. Luis Arraez, who beat out Aaron Judge for the AL batting championship this past season, is on the move, traded to the Marlins for Pablo Lopez, who had been on the Yankees' radar since the last trade deadline. The two have made a little bit of a swap. The Luis Arraez, I think, has control through like 2025. However, the Minnesota had said they'd be willing to swap him for a young, controllable arm, which Lopez is. I think he's under control through 2024. Very young. And the Marlins had needed middle infield help, which Luis Arraez fits, so the swap happens. So, thoughts on this one?
Wow. Sending your leading hitter to the Miami Marlins, I think that's definitely a pretty nuts trade. I mean,
wait, Hank, did you just say wow?
Wow.
Yes, that's exactly what I said. Thank you, Owen Wilson, for that. But yeah, I think Pablo Lopez could definitely help them in the rotation. I think the Twins are like trying to make that big splash to, try and compete in the AL Central, but do they win this trade?
I don't know. I mean, granted, Hank, we were talking about the AL Central race. I mean, the Twins have been in the race now. Granted, it was their division, and then last year the AL Central was just a dumpster fire that the Guardians managed to win. But I mean, you're gonna have the Guardians still going for it this season. The White Sox, hopefully, once they get an appropriate general manager for a young team,
Well,
they
field manager,
might.
yes.
Correct.
Maybe don't hire a guy that intentionally walks guys on 1-2 counts.
Yeah, basically. I'm saying once they get the right leadership, they're gonna be a problem. So the Twins, losing somebody like Luis Arraez, I mean, you gotta hope that Pablo Lopez really comes through, especially because I know the Twins have been a powerhouse of a batting team, but you gotta hope that Pablo Lopez's production on the mound is going to even out what you're gonna lose with Arraez. I think this is a very risky move for the Twins. I think for the Marlins, this is, I'm not going to pick a winner or loser, Hank, but I am going to say I think this is a safer deal for the Marlins than it is for the Twins because they have been wanting to move Pablo Lopez for some time. They've needed middle infield help. They're still a building team. And we know how, as Morganson said in our pre-show meeting, the Marlins just don't keep anybody around.
Yeah.
Oops, we accidentally won the World Series twice.
Yeah, thank you, Jeffrey Loria.
Oh, God. But yeah, this is a pretty significant trade. It's going to be interesting to see, how teams like the Yankees, who have been looking for arms, like Pablo Lopez was on the radar, and now that he has been acquired by Minnesota, it's interesting to see how teams who have been looking for arms are the different directions that they're going to go as we head into, Hank, the final month of the MLB offseason. Next month, spring training is going to start. We're going to have the World Baseball Classic starting up. We're in the home stretch of the offseason already.
Yeah, pitcher and catchers. Pretty soon they're going to be reporting.
Yeah, about 3 weeks. Yep.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting and a lot of fun. Ready for that baseball season to start and ready for a certain baseball show to get back at it. I think you might have heard of it, called Hitting for the Cycle.
Yeah, can't wait for Hitting for the Cycle to return to review and preview.
Mm-hmm.
But
I may have to bring you on as a guest because I don't think I have had you yet.
You haven't. I'm looking forward to it. I want to be on there.
I had because look, I even had Federa on that show once a while back. That's how fun that was.
Yes, I remember you laughing your ass off at that one.
Yeah.
But let's talk about, Hank, a very important day. Tomorrow marks a very important day in the baseball offseason. That doesn't have to do with any of the 30 teams. It's the MLB Hall of Fame class is going to be announced. Obviously, we've had a couple of announcements already from the big committee, but now we've got a whole bunch of participants in the ballot. Let's see here. So we have 14 former players returning to the 2023 ballot after being on the 2022 one. Obviously, a lot of the big names that we've been talking about in the last recent years, controversially, Big Papi getting in with A-Rod not, and Bonds and Clemens not. They were all in there. Bonds and Clemens were in their last year of eligibility. They're gone. Schilling's gone. Big Papi's in. A-Rod is going to be on his second year. But only got 34.3% of the vote last year. The most interesting name for all the returning guys, Hank, is going to be Scott Rowland, who is in his sixth year and made 63.2% of the ballot last year. Todd Helton's in his fifth, had 52% last year. Billy Wagner's in his eighth and only got 51%, which, by the way, I think is absolutely disgusting. I think Billy Wagner should be in the Hall of Fame. And then you got
Billy Wagner had great stuff. He was one of the best closers during that time.
I can't believe he only got 51% in his seventh year. Like, that's absolutely disgusting. But like I said, but as I kind of alluded on ETB last year, now that they chose to put Ortiz in and not A-Rod and Bonds and Clemens with the whole Mitchell report, I don't consider the Hall of Fame. You know, I don't look at it as seriously. I think the baseball writers are an absolute joke. Just looking through, though, Andrew Jones on his sixth year only got 41% last year. Sheffield's getting
disgusting too. Andrew Jones was incredibly talented.
Yeah. Gary Sheffield's on his ninth year only got 40%. Jeff Kent's going to be on his last year only at 32%. He's probably going to be falling off this year. Torrey Hunter and Mark Burley only got 5% and 6% respectively, and they're about to fall off in their third year.
Torrey Hunter got 5%?
Yep.
Torrey Hunter was a better player than people realize.
Debuting on the ballot in 2023, we got Bronson Arroyo, Carlos Beltran, Matt Cain, R.A. Dickey, Jacoby Ellsbury, Andre Ethier, J.J. Hardy, John Lackey, Mike Napoli, Johnny Peralta, Francisco Rodriguez, Houston Street, Jared Weaver, and Jason Worth. I think the interesting names that you're going to be seeing, Hank, in this Hall of Fame voting are going to be, for the returning guys, Scott Rowland, Todd Helton, and Billy Wagner. Like I said, I wish Andrew Jones could get more. I wish A-Rod could get more, considering that they've let Ortiz into the Hall of Fame. But
at that point, you got to let Bonds and Clemens in if you're going to let Piazza in, or Papi in.
Big Papi in. Although Mike Piazza, I think Mike Piazza got a bit of a shaft when he was up for the Hall of Fame.
Why did Piazza get in register in my head? I don't know, but
because Hank,
I do agree that he did get shafted. I think it should have taken him. I think he should have been in his first ballot if he's one of the best hitting catchers of all time.
But I think the other name that's going to be interesting to be looking at, Hank, is going to be Carlos Beltran, because, you know, how are voters going to be swayed with him being involved in the controversy of the Houston Astros?
Yeah, that's going to be a really hot topic, I would imagine. But I have a feeling he gets in, just not on the first ballot, I don't think.
And, I mean, not really too strong of a class. You know, I don't see Bronson Arroyo, don't see Matt Cain or Dickey. Ellsbury, I mean, I'm laughing my ass off. He has a whole island named after him of players who are just, you know, just go away. Seriously. Andre Ethier. I like J.J. Hardy, but no. John Lackey's great, but no. Napoli, no. Peralta, no. K-Rod, Francisco Rodriguez.
No, I don't think he had a long enough prime compared to Billy Wagner.
Fair. Houston Street, Jared Weaver. I like Jason Worth, but I don't know.
No, Jason Worth, I don't really see him as a Hall of Famer.
No. So, I mean, the question's going to be Carlos Beltran.
Scott Rowland, that's another interesting one.
I was just talking about the new guys, the returning guys. Yeah, Rowland.
Oh, yeah.
Wagner.
No, the only name on of the new guys that I think really will gain some traction is Carlos Beltran. And again, I'm not 100% sure if he does get in. I highly doubt it's going to be his first crack.
Considering the percentages, like we said, I wish A-Rod got more. I wish Andrew Jones got more. Helton, Billy Wagner, I think is absolutely atrocious. He's only got 51%. I think, Hank, if Billy Wagner doesn't get in, and no disrespect to Scott Rowland, but I wish it would be Scott Rowland and Billy Wagner, and Todd Helton. But the reality is, if Scott Rowland does not get 75% of the vote this year, there's going to be nobody getting inducted this year.
Yeah, I'm not sure we're going to get anybody either. I mean, at the very least, we got Fred McGriff, but that's probably about it.
And that's what I think, that Fred McGriff getting into the, thanks to the voters committee. Obviously, this is our only show before, because again, tomorrow's the vote. Johnny and Morgeson on ETB episode 169 will have all the talk, the almost immediate reaction to the Hall of Fame vote after it gets announced. Let's take a stop, Hank, before we go into our conference championship previews. Let's talk about something that's going on in hockey that's got a bit of attention. Bruce Boudreau has been fired as Canucks head coach. They have immediately hired Rick Touche as their new head coach. Rick Tocchet, pardon me, as their head coach. But here's the interesting thing that's going on. And Hank, you were talking about this, and I'll let you have the floor for this. Apparently, they were interviewing Tocchet while Boudreau was still coaching. And there's been a whole thing about his coaching uncertainty, and he just continued through. And let's just say the hockey world seems to be very mad at the Vancouver Canucks.
Well, they have every right to be, and there's a lot of reasons why they have every right to be mad at the Vancouver Canucks. I mean, first of all, you're getting a new regime. I think, obviously, Francesco Aquilini knew that he needed to clean house with the Vancouver Canucks, right? I mean, that part was obvious a couple years ago, but then, you hired your coach before you hired the new president or like the operations crew,
which can spell disaster.
That's kind of a red flag. I mean,
I mean, let's look at the New York Jets when they had Adam Gase win a power struggle with McGagnon before he even coached the game.
Oh, there have been examples in Knicks history where that's happened. They hire a coach before they hire the GM.
Fair.
That never works well for starters. But so the problem with bringing in Jim Rutherford and Patrick Alvin was they essentially inherited Bruce Boudreau, who I don't know was necessarily meant to be their coach long term. I think he was trying to, get some respectability to the Vancouver Canucks, because I know his track record in years past has been that of choking and losing in consecutive game sevens with the Capitals and the Ducks, and kind of less successful tenure with the Minnesota Wild. But Bruce Boudreau, for the most part, has been a solid coach. I mean, his teams were contenders. The Capitals, he made the Capitals relevant those first few years when Ovechkin was younger, and then the Ducks were a frequent contender for the Western Conference, although, again, as I mentioned, he'd lost consecutive game sevens at home, so that's really the black mark on his career. So the thinking was that, maybe he'd help turn them around, but unfortunately, they never really were able to develop talent. And since the new guys, Rutherford and Alvin, had no loyalties whatsoever to Bruce Boudreau, they thought, oh, okay, let's weigh our options. Let's talk to other guys. Problem was, in doing so,
they didn't fire.
They violated an unwritten rule, and by secretly interviewing candidates while you still have a coach that's on the job. Not only is that violating an unwritten rule, that is pretty disrespectful.
I mean, Hank, just try to think about it. You know, imagine taking this and putting it into the real working world. That there's a position of a company that is filled, and a boss, you know, is interviewing other people for that position behind the back of the person that's currently there. That's something that would or should not fly in the corporate working world.
Oh no, and it's more common than you think.
That's why I said it should not happen.
Yeah.
So to put Boudreau in this spot is, as you said, very disrespectful. And as you mentioned, Boudreau kind of just trying to help build, you know, a younger franchise that's trying to, you know, like we mentioned, rebuilding, trying to get its footing. I just think, Hank, you know, what they're talking about, like Boudreau, not a long-term option. But I mean, when you're 18, 25, and 3, 39 points, you're down towards the bottom of the Western Conference, let alone the Pacific Division.
Right.
I don't think getting rid of Boudreau is going to really solve anything. And it hasn't done anything for you except get you a whole lot of hate.
Oh, no. Listen, there are problems with the Canucks that go way beyond Boudreau. And there's a reason why they haven't really been relevant since a former Rangers coach, Alain Vigneault, ended up getting fired, and since Aquilini ended up taking over, like, as the new owner. Like, it's really been a franchise that has not been managed well. And, you know, I think this is pretty much another example of the Canucks being a dysfunctional mess. And, like, you know, basically the worst thing is they were going behind his back interviewing other guys, but yet as the rumors kept swirling, the worst part was they never really denied it. They just, like, kept letting all those talks go. And poor Bruce Boudreau kept coaching. He's trying to be as professional as he can while, like, wanting to do what he can to help the team on the ice. But yet he's going into all these days knowing he went into that game against the Oilers knowing that he was pretty much like, you know, a lame duck, dead man walking. And you know, one of the most emotional moments happened after the game where all the fans knew what was going on too. And they were pretty angry at their ownership, and rightfully so. They were chanting, Bruce, there it is. Bruce, there it is. And I don't know how he didn't lose it on the bench and, like, not well up with tears. And you had to feel bad for him because he's getting up there in years. Like, I think he's in his late 60s. We don't know if he's ever going to get another opportunity to coach a team again. So I think that's another error.
68, by the way.
Huh?
68.
Yeah, 68. So that's another reason why I can't help but just sympathize with the guy, because, again, you don't know if he's coaching again, and all the players seem to see the writing on the wall. Everyone went to his office. They shook his hand, and you know, they just essentially thanked him. And, you know, ultimately the inevitable will happen with him being fired. And whether Tocchet is the right decision or not, that remains to be seen. But the fact of the matter is, even if Rick Tocchet becomes as successful as, say, Al Arbor or Stan Bowman,
they shouldn't have done it in the way that they're doing it.
There's a right and wrong way to handle getting rid of your coach. You should have just cut the cord on him, get an interim coach, and then have your search process. That should be the
normal way to be doing things.
Yeah, that's normal. To leave a guy's status hanging around for quite some time, that's just wrong. That very, very wrong and disrespectful.
Hey, JT Miller, if you're watching this, you want to come back home? Get out of that dysfunctional mess?
Hey, I would be happy to have JT Miller back. I'm also hearing Timo Meyer's name in Rangers trade talks.
Should be fun
Imagine
to-
a line with Panarin, Trocheck, and Timo Meyer. Like,
Oh, that's gross in a good way.
oh yeah, no, I would totally love that. I mean, I know defensively the Rangers have their share of flaws, but you still have a lot of talent in that area. Adam Fox, Ryan Lindgren. I still think Keandre is good. The problem is,
I do too.
You can't keep pairing him with Trouba all the time.
No. All right. Let's end things, Hank. Let's talk about Conference Championship Sunday. Let's start with the NFC Championship. It's going to take place at 3 o'clock on Fox. It's an odd year, an odd numbered year, which means the NFC title game goes first. It's the 49ers and the Eagles. And in a little bit of late breaking news from the time we're recording this, the Eagles have opened up as a 2-point favorite in Philadelphia.
All right. I would have thought that this game would be a pick'em, but I've been pretty high on the 49ers all year long. I know that this is going to come across as me being a hater, but I think they're going to win a very close game on the road in Philadelphia. Give me San Fran. I got to stick by that hill.
I'm going to agree with you. San Fran has been my NFC pick since the start of the postseason, and for a reason. As we mentioned before, their team is absolutely stacked. McCaffrey, Mitchell at the running back position, Ayuk and Deebo Samuel at the receiving helm, George Kittle, one of the best tight ends in this game. The defensive work with Bosa and company is absolutely phenomenal. And, they all keep Brock Purdy safe, and credit where credit's due. Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant, as Tree lovingly calls him, Big Cock Brock. He has been absolutely delivering on all cylinders. I know Jalen Hurts has had quite the year. I know the Eagles have had an amazing year and that they have the home field here. However, I just think the 49ers have all the momentum. They have had the win streak. They just seem unbeatable. The Eagles, we have seen be beatable against the likes of their NFC East rivals and even against the lowly New Orleans Saints. So I am going to go, Hank, with you. I'm going to keep my pick, since the start of the postseason, and I'm going to go with the dog. Give me the 49ers upset city.
I don't know if I'd really go as far as to call it an upset, but hey, I mean,
by odds language, by literal odds
language, yeah, that's an upset, but not an upset in that sense.
All right. A similar story here with the AFC Championship game, the Bengals at the Chiefs. I'm putting the Chiefs here at 1.5. I have been seeing on the site they use their opening as a 1. However, more Brooks are opening up and putting the Chiefs at 2.5 and 3. I think 1.5 is right in the middle. Perfect here.
Again, another game that's essentially a pick'em. Tom.
I'm Tom here. Oh, you know what? I should do the Johnny thing, by the way. So, yes. NFC Championship game is going to be on Fox. That's obviously going to be Kevin Burkhardt and Greg Olsen special. This is going to be the last game for Jim Nance and Tony Romo of this season.
Probably for the best. The Tony Romo drives me nuts.
Is that with or without Giants bias?
Without Giants bias. Oftentimes, just the way he goes, oh, I don't know, Jim. Yeah, no. He was fun the first few years, but after a while, it got old.
I don't know, Hank.
I mean, it could be worse. You could be listening to Chris Collinsworth, but I digress.
Now here's a guy.
Oh, God, stop. Bengals against the Chiefs. You know what? I can't believe I'm doing this. Gonna go with the road dog again. I will not disrespect the Bengals. And you know what? If they were playing if I didn't have those high expectations for the Bills, I probably would have taken the Bengals in that game. But the Bengals have been so hot. I mean, let me look at how they've been doing in the second half. I don't think they've been losing too many games either.
No, I mean, like I said, they were a little shaky first 6 weeks of the season or so. But ever since then, they had kept consistent pace with
They
the
have not
Ravens.
lost a game since Halloween.
Okay, I've heard all I needed to hear. And I just want to add also, Hank, the Chiefs' defense this season has been a little bit of a question mark. For all we talk about Mahomes and, having Kelsey and not losing a step even with the departing Tyreek Hill, the defense has been the big question mark. And Nick Morris and I constantly say it's a battle of will Mahomes and company score more or will the Chiefs' defense let up more? The Chiefs' defense is just not as strong as it's been the last couple of seasons. And when you're talking about a high-powered offense that, as you mentioned, hasn't lost a game since that showdown with the Browns on Halloween, it's just, I'm sorry. I even said I didn't think that the Chiefs would even make it to the conference title game. Granted, that was the thought without a Tyreek Hill in the immediate aftermath. But Mahomes and company, it's Mahomes. He is still Mahomes. He is always going to be Mahomes. But I'm going to go with the team that I have had representing the AFC, minus the time that I thought the Bills, were going to ride the momentum of Hamlin. And even then, who they played last week was these guys. And I'm going to go, I don't know. I should play both animal sounds here. I'm going to go with the cats. and I am going to say, I am going with the dog. Hank, say it with me. Don't disrespect the Bengals. I'm going 2 for 2. Upset City. Road team takes it and celebrates it in hostile territory. Bengals for the second straight year go to the Super Bowl. Bengals Niners for the big game.
Love it.
All right. That is going to do it for this edition of, episode 40 of Game On. Hank, this was an absolute blast.
Oh, heck yeah. It was fun to finally get to do a show with you. And now I've pretty much hosted something with every single member of the Empty the Bench podcast network. So awesome.
Same. Now I can check that off my list as well. Once again, just going to scroll this little thing here about all the social medias. Make sure to follow the show at Game On ETB on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Make sure to follow the Empty the Bench Network at ETB Network on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and on TikTok. You can follow Johnny, who, thanks again to Johnny for taking my place on ETB this week. Follow him at Montalbano NY. Follow me at Thomas J. Albano, Tom Talk Sports 9. And you can follow Hank at Ranger Hanky 96. Thank you for tuning in to this edition. Johnny and Hank should, I think, next week be back at normal Tuesday, 7 p.m. time. The crew will be back together. Everything should be back a little more to normal. Let's see if Johnny and Nick on Wednesday make the announcement of something else that's going on with the ETB schedule. Not concerning Game On, but more concerning ETB and the other show I host with Zambendo, MMA Outsiders. But that's neither here or there. Hank, once again, thank you for allowing me to join you this week. Been absolutely fun. Hopefully we get to do this again soon.
Yeah, definitely. It's been an absolute blast. And hey, even though the season's over, I do want to say let's go Big Blue. But for now, LGR, baby.
LGR. So that's Hank. I'm Tom. Take care, everybody. See you next week on Game On.